if you were to pick between like the Bucks and the Magic and who was more impressive in the game, the Bucks barely beat the Magic with no Paolo and Franz. Do you think it's just the Magic by default, or
It's
is your faith in the Bucks growing?
it's honest. Wow. It's honestly not. And I really try to sit here and look at their last 10 games with a happy face and be like, yeah, this is something I can really latch myself onto. But, you beat Orlando team that don't have their two best players. You beat Brooklyn in the dogfight. You lost to Boston, lost to Atlanta, who's been playing really well. You beat Detroit. I don't think Cade played that game, if I remember correctly. Maybe he did. You beat Washington. You beat Miami. You beat Charlotte. You beat Indiana. You beat Chicago. And then you have a really good win against Houston. Like, these last 10 games haven't really been impressive, but I think with Milwaukee is just about finding their stride and getting on the right path. I mean, Taurean Prince is another guy who's, I think, shooting like 55% from the three-point line. So he's been stroking it really well. So, and Chris Middleton is back. So that's something you like to see with this team. I'm going to wait on it. I don't want to say that I feel more confident in them yet, because still you had a dogfight with Orlando last night or whatever it was, and their two best players didn't play. But I'm definitely just gonna notice it. I think for Orlando, nobody's talking about it, but Mosley's mid-season development as a coach. I mean, this dude lost his best player, then he lost his second best player, then he had to give the keys to Jalen Suggs. KCP hasn't been shooting the ball at the clip you want him to shoot, and this team is still winning a ton of games, playing extremely hard. They look like they don't miss a beat. I mean, obviously, we'll see how long, this streak goes up for. This is only the first game or two without Franz. But at the same time, the job Mosley's done over there, he's done an incredible job. I do think they're definitely one. Honestly, outside of Boston and the Knicks, you kind of deem Cleveland and the Magic as dark horses coming in because you didn't know what you would get from both teams, the kind of two different teams. Cleveland, it was to see how Mobley would improve, how would DG look. Orlando, it's the internal growth. How are they going to look? You're still waiting to see all of them together in this new environment. But I agree. I think, they're definitely a dark horse team. It's just about how that offense looks when all three of these guys are going to be on the floor. We didn't really get to see a taste of that yet. But I'm extremely proud of what Mosley's been able to do in keeping this team afloat with Franz out, with Boncaro out. Like, this has just been an incredible job from him. So I think that's the takeaway I'm getting from it. As for Milwaukee, it's just really, they're winning games. You like that. You want them in the playoff picture because they do have Giannis. The takeaway really is Giannis developing a mid-range shot as what he needs to at this stage of his career, because as athleticism will start to decline. You need to develop something in your game to continue to be an elite player, and the mid-range is something he's definitely doing. And the mid-range will also help him be a little bit more efficient in the playoffs in terms of when he plays certain matchups that can create that wall or that can schematically scheme up against him and make him struggle. So it's exciting to see him get the mid-range. I'm going to wait on Milwaukee, though. I'm not too optimistic about it. I'm just still in the wait-and-see process.
Jamal Mosley is a great coach, and I think what this game showed, even in the loss, is more so that the Magic, even when at the forefront of their wins, it's been plastered with the star, like it's Paolo dominating or Franz dominating. This team's identity is defensive identity. Like, that's what their identity is. And they stay in games because they play elite level defense, and they just need a couple guys to step up offensively to end up winning these games. But it's the argument why, Paolo got discredited last year and Franz kind of got propped up this year without Paolo is, Franz was doing the same thing that Paolo was doing last year. Just, he was just, the numbers maybe and the wins were a little bit more, but I feel like the Magic's identity is just defensively. That's what they are. And what Franz was doing, he was basically having the same efficiency as Paolo last year. They just need somebody at the forefront to take that volume of shots and offense, but their offense is always pretty much bottom barrel like it was last year. They just win because of defense, and I think the next step for them is when Paolo and when Franz come back is if they can take a leap offensively, because that's the biggest question mark I have with the team right now is when all of them are playing together, is this still one of the worst offenses in the NBA, or can they take a leap and be one of the 10 best offenses? Like, that's a major, gigantic leap. But what does that look like? Because to me, it feels like the ceiling for them does feel a little bit capped just because of what they have been offensively.
My question my question is for the Magic. Do you only become a great offense if you start making threes? Because the biggest problem with Orlando, with the Magic, that it's been for the last few years, I would say, is that they still lack 3-point shooting. When you got KCP, we were all excited about it because we thought they were getting another shooter. You had, of course, Jalen Suggs go ahead and get his 3-point percentage up from last season. So we're anticipating them to take that leap shooting wise, but we haven't seen it on a consistent basis enough for the Orlando Magic to put themselves up with one of the upper echelon offenses. That's where I feel like when we get to have those conversations with them being a better offense, when they start to finally shoot the three ball better, we'll start to see it translate in the offensive rating. And when it, of course, comes to the stats of them being one of the better offenses. But with the personnel they currently have, I don't see that being a reality where they're just suddenly one of the better 3-point shooting teams, because although Paolo is a decent 3-point shooter, he isn't a great 3-point shooter. Franz has become a decent 3-point shooter. Jalen Suggs has taken a step back, but hopefully now with the ball in his hands more, he starts to become a little bit more confident. But even still versus Milwaukee, he shot 27%, although the game before that he did shoot 40. But again, there's the hot and colds there. And then KCP starting to figure it out slowly but surely. There's just not much faith that I can have from these cast of players that they're just going to find their 3-point shot and it's going to translate to being one of the more efficient offenses.
Yeah, they're 24th in offensive rating this year.
Yeah, but it's like I'm on cleaning the glass right now. I feel like it's deeper than just the three ball. They're one of the worst turnover percent. Like they're bottom in the league in turnover percentage. So they turn the ball over at a high rate. You know, in the half court, they're not just bad from the 3-point line. They're a bad mid-range team, short, long, non-corner, corner. They're just a bad jump shooting team. Like they're 7th in the league at the rim. So, at the rim is their bread and butter. But for the most part, they're a bad jump shooting team that turns the ball over. You know, so if you can get more guys that are just good, like the Orlando doesn't have a ton of good offensive players. They don't have a lot of versatility in that department. It's really Boncaro, Franz, Suggs is on his way, but Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, Wendell Carter Jr., Goga Wagner. Yeah, these aren't. That's why I just skipped it.
No, I respect the hell out of that.
Didn't even try that. But they don't have a ton of good offensive players, so it's really just predicated on that defense making plays, that defense causing chaos, and then you let your superstars ride it out.
Yeah, the Magic are actually dead last in 3-point percentage in the league right now, shooting under 31%.
That's why it's hard to analyze them, because they're playing well without Paolo. They play well without Franz. But even when you get those two players back, it doesn't feel like the team takes that drastic of a jump, because they don't have the personnel to actually have an elite level offense. Like if Paolo is dominating the ball, that takes away from Franz. If they're both kind of sharing, now one has to play off ball and be a 3-point shooter. And I think, they often get compared to Boston a lot because of the wing duo. And then Suggs is more so morphing into Derek White than a Marcus Smart. But Boston, Jason Tatum took a ton of threes. He upped his volume. Jaylen Brown became a great 3-point shooter. They have players, their star players, that started taking a ton more threes. So I wonder when the Magic are fully healthy, if that's what Paolo and Franz are kind of looking at to change in their games, and if they're just going to take much more threes to kind of catch up with the league and to make sure they can keep up with other explosive offenses, because they have the talent to, but the play style, I think right now, limits what they could be.
Question. This is actually really interesting. In transition, they are 7th in frequency. Can somebody guess what number they would be in points per possession? Like, where would their ranking be?
29th?
Yeah, this is transition. No, not 29th.
In transition, I think they're probably one of the better transition teams in the league.
You would assume so, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of the worst.
Right. Jesus Christ. They are 24th in points per possession in transition, but they're 7th in frequency. So they're going to go, but they're just not, a good transition team. Like
I mean, even last year when like everyone was healthy, they were still a bottom 10 offense, or like even when Paolo and Franz, and of course they're not the same players, specifically Franz, but it's not like this team has really shown us any sort of extended stretch of them being like a highly efficient offense. And no matter how great your defense is, you have to have an efficient offense. And to win an NBA Finals, of course, we're talking years down the road, but to be a legitimate contender, you probably need a top 10 offense. So this team, I think, just natural progression needs to get there. But of course, like some of the signings they had, like KCP, for example, was someone I think we expected to come in and shoot like 38%. And he hasn't really come close to that mark, even though I know November was a lot better than October. I'm not sure what he's been doing the last like week or so. But internally, they had to develop some of these, signings are going to have to hit in terms of shooters. But the foundation is there. I think that's what we have to be excited about, right? This was a team that coming into the season, I think our expectations are like win a playoff series. That'd be amazing. And like I said, I still think they have a decent chance to be like a dark horse in the East, but you do worry like what happens when everyone's healthy and everyone's back together and we don't see like this level of production from Franz or Paulo. And of course, Jalen Suggs is naturally going to take a back seat. That's when I think the discussions are going to get a little more serious about like, is this kind of just an addition by subtraction? Because they were rattling off win after win after win, a couple weeks ago when Paulo was out and it was just Franz and Jalen Suggs there. And then once everyone gets inserted back into the lineup, the offense continues to struggle. If Franz looks more like last year Franz and this year Franz, they still have a lot to work out. But they're a young team. The defense is there. Yep. They try hard as fuck. They get out in transition, like you mentioned, Riv. So they do a lot of the smaller things on the margins that lead to these wins.
Yeah, that's the kind of the scary part. Kind of, sort of, in a sense where you look at them, you look at New York, Cleveland, and Boston, just those four to talk about it. They're all, like Cleveland, New York, and Boston are high-powered offenses. I think they're one of the 10 best offenses in basketball. I think Boston and Cleveland are both top 5. But Boston and Cleveland are top 10 defenses, and I think I looked at it early. New York is like the 16th. So it's like you would rather have a 16th ranked defense with an elite offense because I feel like it just makes life easier. Where Orlando, it's kind of the opposite where you're going into these matchups and obviously Banchero, Franz, they haven't played. So we're just talking as of today. This can easily change, but they don't really at this point have a efficient, cohesive offense, but they have an elite defense. So you would think we make it ugly, we make it hard, we make these games, really nasty. And, then you can pull out some wins. Here we go. But at the same time, these offenses are really, methodic and they really, get to their spots and do what they want to do. So definitely a tricky slope with Orlando. I hope they figure it out.
Can I also add, and last thing I'll say, and we can move on. We've seen over the last few years, elite level defenses in the regular season, 9 out of 10 times, you make it to the playoffs.
For sure.
And you have some level of success. Minnesota was just one of the best playoff teams last year. They were the number 1 defense. Look at Milwaukee a couple years back where they were the number 1 defense in the league. Cleveland was the number 1 defense in the league, gave them a playoff spot. The Magic were one of the best defense in the league last year, got them a playoff spot. The Rockets have been one of the surprise teams of the league this year. Look at last night, prime example. You barely scored 90 points, but because your defense is so incredibly great night in, night out, it gives you a chance to go ahead and play winning basketball. And even on a lighter scale, because their offense is a lot better. But look at the Dallas Mavericks and the run they were able to go on last year in that playoff stretch where in the West, they ended up becoming one of the hottest defenses in the league, and it helped translate and push them over the edge to get to the NBA Finals. They fell short, but defense can take you a long way. I think that kind of goes in what you're saying, and maybe I misheard what you were saying, but if you would rather have a middle-of-the-pack defense and a high-level offense, not really the case, not so often, at least when it translates to making the playoffs. And again, if I misunderstood you, that's on me.
Oh, yeah, I was just talking playoff series. They'll make the playoffs for sure, but Minnesota, Ant-Man was on fire. That's really what the propeller was. He ended up getting a heat stroke. The Bucks, they have Giannis. Unless you're telling me Banchero can have one of those, I'll believe you. Like, if you say I'll 100% believe you. But I think, like, even with Dallas, you still have Luka, you still have Kyrie. They started to hit the three ball at the opportune time. I don't know if Orlando has those type of personnel. I still want to see that happen.
I think that's why, we need to see how they look when they're healthy this year, because their offensive rating this year is not an indication of what they're going to be because they've been unhealthy. But if they could be a top 15 offense in the league with their defense, then I think we're having a serious conversation about them upsetting a team and maybe making a conference finals run, because that can really propel them. But yeah, I think we just have to see how they look like when they're healthy, just see how they're going to play to really try to make a full analysis on this. But the structure is there, like Dell's mentioned.